think with God.
Like a Gregorian chant.
Yeah, that's how he did it. It was like a Gregorian chant. It was very cool. All right, Bruce, I don't know if this is where we are or not. Can you tell me, we're reading Absence from Felicity, the story
Hmm.
of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles, and
By Kenneth Wapnick, PhD.
by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD, correct the mundo.
Can't miss that part.
Ah, uh,
Inquiring minds that want to know.
yeah, so you have in your book, can you tell me where
I
we
have us on, I think we got to the bottom of page 234.
okay, and
But
what were some of the words there?
well, at the top of page 235 would be begin dictation of principle 25 followed.
Okay, let me go and find um because
Do you want me to just start in there and we can,
well let me find it first
well, it's
because
probably good for you to find it. Yes.
yeah, because otherwise I'll be chasing you.
Right.
Um and because somehow or the other it came open on a page where um there wasn't a bookmark and there we go, dictation of principle 25
There we go.
followed. Okay.
Yay.
Yay,
So we're,
see?
we're about 45% according to your calculated online version.
Yeah, pretty darn good. And
Yeah.
yeah, part of that I think is probably going to be appendices and what do you call it? Uh, so
Epiglottis.
yeah, yeah. All right, so why don't you start reading then?
Sure. Okay. On the top of page 235 in the print version that I have, Ken's narration begins, dictation of principle 25 followed, which Jesus then illustrated by an incident involving a friend and colleague of Helen. Portions of this illustration were later used in chapter 1 as they specifically referred to Jesus' ability to cancel out errors, being, quote, in charge of the process of atonement, unquote. Helen then asked if there were any corrections that Jesus wanted her to make on the notes. He answered, yes, to change the word, quote, sin, unquote, to, quote, absence of love, unquote. Sin is a man-made word with threat connotations he made up himself. No real threat is involved anywhere. Just because, quote, nature abhors a vacuum, unquote, which is true enough, it does not follow that a vacuum is filled with hellfire. Nothing is gained by frightening yourself, and it's very destructive. Miracles need freedom from fear. Part of their atonement value involves just that. The word atone, in quotes, really means, quote, undo, unquote. So I think that's plenty to just talk about right there.
Yeah.
The idea that the sin is really the absence of love, which I think is a great redefinition. I also oftentimes use substitution, separation, and specialness, which also are essentially absence of love. But anything that's really a consolation prize for choosing the wrong thought system that doesn't imply the need for punishment, and eliminates the cause of fear, that would be a suitable replacement as well, because the sin that the ego would want to make permanent is an uncorrectable error, which would mean that we've burned the bridge back to our right mind and therefore to heaven, the real world, or creator, whatever else you want to label that with, the piece that we never left. But that's made up because it's an unburnable bridge. In fact, we're already on the other side of the bridge. We're just dreaming that we left.
Yeah, and I love the way he redefined two very important things here.
Mm-hmm.
Sin to mean absence of love, and atone means undo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that, a lot of people will say at one and but really it's just the undoing. The atonement is the undoing, not the at one although that's the result. But until we actually undo, then we're stuck in sin. We're stuck in this world where we think that sin is a threat, and that we are being threatened by the very world around us.
I really
So
like the way you phrase that, Lena, because atonement really is the process. It's also known as forgiveness, salvation, um, resurrection. I mean, so many other different words that really describe that process of letting go of the belief in separation. And at one-ment is the result, which is really where we've never left. But because we think we've left, we need the reverse process, the undo process, to get us back to that place in our mind that we never left. And that's usually, as the course points out, a fairly slow process because um, we don't want to give up the alleged and assumed benefits of the ego that we think still hold some promise out to us. We have to look at them one by one, or maybe batches at a time as we learn to generalize and pick up some speed and realize, well, there's really nothing to that. There's the zero track record of the ego becomes more and more evident the more we look at it carefully. And then it's an easier and easier decision as we apply it to more and more areas of our mind.
exactly, exactly. And it's like the bell curve. We start out, at the bottom, and we just, learn, grow, learn, grow, learn, grow, learn, grow, learn, grow. Then we get up to the top, and then all the rest of it is just letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. It's that roller coaster, the first big dip when you just go over the hill. Only it goes back down to zero. Eventually the net is zero. And so all of this thing of what we're doing here is really undoing. And I was doing today's lesson also and reading through the the introduction, which that's if you don't do that when you do the uh the review lessons, I like to do it like just to remind me of what I'm doing here. And the introduction says right there, now we review again, this time aware we are preparing for the second part of learning how the truth can be applied. And a lot of people say, well, the first 50 lessons are the undoing lessons, and then the rest of them are the, repair, refix, whatever. But really, until we get up to this particular um, review, we still are in the midst of a lot of undoing. And so now we're learning how we can actually apply the truth rather than continuing to, of course, we're going to continue to undo.
Exactly.
That will happen
The
uh,
undoing is ongoing until we're done with the course, really.
until we've done. Yeah, until we're
Mhm.
done. You undo till you're done. You get back down to that 0 point, and then you're at equilibrium, and all that was before you is gone. Uh, so here we are starting with these lessons, and what are these lessons? My mind holds only what I think with God.
Mhm.
We've spent this whole time emptying, supposedly, or showing the ego the door, and saying here's the way out, and doing the undoing and the emptying, and now we're refilling the storehouse with the thoughts that we share with God. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it does to me. So I don't care what you think. No, excuse me. Yes, of course it's important. Sorry. I guess I'm feeling silly this morning. Okay, so do you want me to continue reading or you want to continue reading?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'll say, okay, so uh, Ken says this next portion from Helen's notebook was never transcribed, although later dictations covered the same idea of turning to Jesus for help, allowing him to be our guide in all things large or small. And once again, the whole idea of turning to Jesus for help is something that I don't know a lot of course people emphasize, but he's pretty clear about it throughout the course. And so, even though we go through it and saying, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, actually, until we actually can turn to Jesus for help, we're, you know, we're just, blowing smoke, I guess. So
If I could just stop and add
go
something
ahead.
right there.
Yeah,
I was going to say, and Ken Wapnick often points out is, Jesus is a symbol, just as the Course reminds us that we're symbols. So anything representing or symbolizing an ego-free presence in our mind is suitable. I mean, you can call it Rumpelstiltskin or Engelbert Humperdinck, and it doesn't matter. It's as long as there's something that represents to you an ego-free symbol. The name and the words don't matter because they're just symbols. And even the visual that we usually have is usually anthropomorphic, um, but it's really ultimately our real identity that we're calling on, our higher self, our real self, whatever you want to call it. Again, the labels don't matter. It's just the fact that we're willing to reach beyond the little self that we made up to acquire the perspective that will show us that we can look at that self we made up, see that it hasn't worked, or as Ken says, it's the thought system that made up a maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem, and which is the world, and including our own bodies. And if we can just keep looking at that with Jesus or Holy Spirit, we need that help. And so Jesus is a particularly handy symbol for most of us in the Western world who, even if we haven't had a Christian upbringing in terms of formal religion, there's enough cultural osmosis, if you will, of that image that it'd be pretty hard to find someone except someone who's lived in a cave in some other part of the world, or just totally shut off from a whole lot of culture that hasn't been exposed to that symbol at one point or another. But also it means we need to forgive that symbol in our mind. We need to forgive ourselves for projecting our unconscious guilt onto whatever symbol we might have used to represent the undoing in that process, right?
exactly. Yes, yes, yes. And it is just a symbol. And as you were talking, I was thinking, I wonder what would happen if you started replacing all these pictures of Jesus that you see here with the picture of a 30-year-old Middle Eastern man from around the first century. What what would people think if, suddenly the Jesus that is the, blue-eyed, long blonde hair, was actually, a you know, dark, swarthy Middle Eastern guy. You know, it would be because that whole area is Palestine, and if you're looking at Palestinian people, you're probably going to see something pretty close to how Jesus looked in those days. And, if we started replacing the images of Jesus with somebody who looked like that, what would it do? What would the world do? And how could things change if the image that we had of what we consider goodness was to suddenly be that of a Palestinian man? I don't know. Anyway, so
And it's also, I think, helpful to remember that the biblical Jesus and the Course's Jesus have absolutely nothing to do with each other, other than the Course attempts to correct many of the misconceptions. And I'll have to read Gary's books the third or fourth time because I know it's in there somewhere. There's a reference to something like over 600 corrections in A Course in Miracles to the Christian Bible.
to the Christian Bible, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So there's a lot of things that need to be corrected. I mean, the first and foremost is the idea that God made the world, is interested in what's going on in the world, cares about what happens or doesn't happen in the world with specific individuals, and even knows about galaxies or planets or atoms or anything. That whole premise is completely upended and uprooted in A Course in Miracles. So, I mean, right off the bat, there's one hugely crucial difference. And then, of course, the idea of uh, a son that's crucified in order to atone for the sins that, of course, a miracle says didn't happen. So there's some hugely foundational, fundamental disconnects between the two thought systems. And
Right.
so I think looking at the biblical Jesus and the course's Jesus, um, from that perspective, we see that they really start from almost completely antithetical foundations in terms of the basic premises of the whole ontological thought system, if you will.
Yeah. And yet Helen saw them as the same. And Helen saw them as that because what she was seeing was the love. And that's what it is. Of course, there have been no fictitious human living, including you and me, ever.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's you have to understand the premise is that, this that we think what happened, what we think is happening, we think is really, really here. And so, that whole thing, the mystical Jesus story of a human who became superhuman, who developed abilities that were beyond the abilities of his fellow, countrymen or fellow humans, who could do things that other people couldn't do, that giving a character that what we perceive as divinity, and then connecting that to our salvation. That's children do that all the time, and it is a very immature way of looking at everything. But if we understood that, Jesus, the biblical Jesus, is a symbol for the mind of God, and therefore, we can look at the person and say, oh, he was good, and what did he teach us? I mean, look at Joel Goldsmith. All of his teaching comes from the Bible, basically, and he is able to look through the Bible and see the things that most of us would say, oh, that's horrible and hideous, and he was able to look through it and see a truth beyond it that didn't coincide with the actual what we consider the physical effect, but the reality of it, the love that it represents. And so, that's why, I don't mind. In fact, I like, my idea of Jesus as the man, because I see it as a man who became transformed from being human to being divine, and a
Hmm.
symbol that it's not only possible, but it's necessary for us to transform in the same way.
Yep.
So so that's, and so, and he says that, and he's talking about Jesus a lot,
Hmm.
really, and so you can't help but relate to what your picture of Jesus is. And so, yeah, anyway, and Glorian has posted in the chat, Spiritual Reinterpretation of Scripture by Joel Goldsmith is a good book. Yeah. And that's Spiritual Reinterpretation of Scripture. I think, I know, our friend Regina Don Akers did a reinterpretation of the New Testament, but it's not the same kind of reinterpretation that Joel did, because Joel didn't just give it like a meaning that, matched what the course said, but actually looked for what the symbols meant. And so, it really is a really interesting thing to look at if you haven't done that. And of course, I know you're well aware of Joel Goldsmith. So,
I, I know of him, and I've probably read a tiny little bit of his work, but no, really, I'm not
uh,
versed enough in
you
his work to. I know a lot of people rave about it. So
yeah,
yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
raver,
yeah,
because
yeah.
he just spells it out so clearly, and you can see, oh my gosh, this is really actually how it works. So, I love Joel. So, and I think he is absolutely, when he passed away in, was it 1964? Um, Not long afterwards, Helen began hearing the voice. And I think that it's the voice that Helen heard was an absolute continuation of the voice that Joel heard. And, she interpreted it through her mind, through her psychoanalytical mind, whereas he was interpreting it through his Christian theology mind. So it's the same interpretation, but it's expressed in a different way. So I highly encourage you to check into or just read anything by Joel, and I think you'll be blown away. Maybe, maybe not. Why do I say that? I don't know. I can't predict what you're going to think.
Well, one thing that you were just talking about, and thanks for the recommendation. Yeah, one thing that you were just sharing kind of reminded me of is a few years ago, you and I on Saturday mornings were reading Gary Renard's fourth book, Lifetimes When Jesus and Buddha Knew Each Other. And there was plenty in the second half of that book, and as well as the introduction, that was wonderful. But really, what really stands out for me is the first half of the book, where Arten and Persa, with Gary's transcription, um, outline a half a dozen lives of Jesus, Buddha, and Mary Magdalene, where they were all basically learning course principles through all these different teachers in different lifetimes, and going through all of their grievances and petty jealousies and specialness and all the ins and outs of looking at the ego with the Holy Spirit and learning to master the course's metaphysics, not just intellectually, but learning to apply that to their everyday thought. And I found that really helpful, because not only was it kind of like an outline or a recipe for how to do it ourselves, but it made it seem doable. I mean, it's like if they basically were at the position we're at, where we're learning to look at the contents of our minds without condemnation, see how much we're projecting, see how crazy that is, and forgive ourselves, and then all the different facets of that. That's huge, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's really what we're all doing one way or another, and they're exemplifying that, of taking it all the way home, metaphysically and metaphorically and literally, is tremendous, isn't it? Yeah.
it is. And again, when you're reading something like that, and we have all this discussion, is reincarnation real, blah blah blah. And really it's not. It's just the one mind going through all the different scenarios of life. And Jesus, Buddha, and Mary Magdalene. It was really fun reading that book,
Oh yeah.
and seeing where all those things came together, and all those teachings came from. It's, yeah, great. So let me continue reading. Uh,
Please.
okay, so this next portion from Helen's notebook, I'm just rereading that. Um, let's see, let me close this up because I don't need that. Okay. This next portion from Helen's notebook was never transcribed, although later dictations covered the same idea of turning to Jesus for help, allowing him to be our guide in all things large or small. And then we're going to see where he talks about it. The reason I direct everything that is unimportant is because it is no way to waste your free will. If you insist on doing the trivial your way, you waste too much time and will on it. Will cannot be freed if it is tied up in trivia. It never gets out. I will tell you exactly what to do in connection with everything that does not matter. Hang on. Will you read? I'm going to answer the. No, I'm not going to answer this real quick
Okay.
because it's my daughter and.
Well, I do have a comment. I guess that means that my inspiration and guidance to not become a Jeopardy contestant, despite my wife's suggestion that I do, is probably a good idea. I'm usually too slow at even the categories that I do know a few answers on. So,
Well,
speaking of trivia,
if you were thinking with the mind of God, you'd know it all. Uh,
yeah, and yeah, the whole point is, if there's just one thing, um, what does knowledge of all the diversity really buy us? I mean, there's nothing wrong in the world of being able to navigate, our dream, and and you know, learn to figure out how to survive and get along in the world. But ultimately, that all comes out in the wash, and all the different. I think the course even suggests, and mentions that we at this point we seem to have different skills and abilities, but when we're all done at the top of the ladder, um, all of that goes away, because what need is there for ability when we've reached the ultimate peace and oneness and innocence and perfection of a real being, which we can't even fathom at this point.
Right. And
But we're drawn to it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be drawn to this material, right? We wouldn't have been led to pick up the course and study it. And
I wasn't even just drawn to it. I was hurled into it, actually. I was like, whoa, God, okay, I guess I can't do anything else. Here I am.
you were
So
thrown into a vat of coarseness.
I was thrown into a vat of coarseness.
Okay.
That
Well,
reminds me.
fortunately, there's plenty of life preservers along the wall.
Exactly.
Great.
Do you ever hear that Smothers Brothers song, Chocolate?
Gosh, I don't know if I have.
Okay, I'm just
I think of Mom Always Like You Best and Tommy
okay.
Smothers'
Well,
mantra,
think
right? But
about this. I was a big Brothers fan. Okay.
okay, okay.
All right. I fell into a vat of chocolate. I fell into a vat of chocolate. I yelled fire when I fell into the chocolate. Why'd you yell fire when you fell into the chocolate? Well, I yelled fire when I fell in the chocolate because no one would save me if I yelled chocolate. So there you go.
That's good. That's good.
It's a much longer song, much more repetition, but I thought I'd get to the cut to the choice. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
You fall in a vat of chocolate, yell fire. And so here we are. We're in the vat of chocolate. Anyway, so
Or just yell, throw in some strawberries or something.
really. But what I was going to say about this is it's almost like, whenever I'm sure you probably have done this and you're probably better than many other people in this direction just because I kind of know how you are. But you get like a piece of furniture that is in pieces. It's delivered to you in its boards and its screws and it's all these different things, right? And, some people, just might just start trying to put this thing together and, put this here, put this there. Other people will look at the instructions and say, oh, I have 15 of these screws and I have, this and that, and this goes here and this goes here. And you read the instructions. Well, this is what Jesus is telling us. It's already written. The instructions are here. Actually, the furniture is actually even already built, but you're perceiving it as being bits and pieces that you need to somehow string together to make something. And all you have to do is read the instructions, listen to the voice, because the script is already written. So you don't have to figure anything out. You just have to do as you were shown or told. A lot of these things have confusing constructions because they're not English, or they weren't made by English speaking people.
Or
But they have,
4-point font.
yeah, or 4-point font, yes. But some of them have pictures of where this part goes and all these different things.
And drawings, they have to look really carefully, because there might be one little tab that's works if you put it together one way, but if the tab's on the other side of the thing that you're assembling, it won't work at all. And then you have to undo the 17 other screws you just put together.
Yes.
I've done that a few
Oh.
times.
You put the top on upside down,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
you put the left side on the right side,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
you're
And
going,
you end up looking like a malfunction in the Star Trek transporter room.
oh no. Oh, that's
I'll
a
ima- was a Mad Magazine skit, uh, well, not a skit, but a little cartoon years ago of a spoof on Star Trek, because it came out in about the same era, when the original Star Trek series, and they showed a malfunction in the transporter room, and somebody materialized with arms and legs and facial features in the wrong place. It's pretty comical, actually.
It is pretty comical, but pretty scary because it
Well,
reminds
yeah.
me of The
Yeah.
Fly. Remember the movie The Fly?
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Jeff Goldblum. Yes.
Jeff Goldblum, but originally Vincent Price. Oh my goodness,
Really?
that's
Was that a remake? I didn't know that. Okay.
yeah, it was. Oh yeah, The
Oh,
Fly.
okay.
Oh, you should watch the first one. It
Oh,
is so because it's old. Vincent Price, black and white, I believe. I
yeah, I
don't think
guess. Yeah, it must be.
color.
Yeah.
So,
Uh,
but yeah, it's pretty. I saw it when I was a kid and scared the crap out of me. So, I'll never go into a transporter. Believe me, just in case there happened to be something like
Not
that.
going to be an early adopter, huh?
Yes,
My niece did my sister. We're digressing a little bit, but it's kind of fun.
that's okay.
Um, a week or two ago, my sister and I were talking on the phone, and she said, "Yeah, guess what I just did? I I I got a ride in a self-driving car because my niece bought a Tesla, and
Uh-huh.
apparently she got the option that allows the self-driving feature or something like that. And so she said it did pretty darn good. It just basically um, programmed in the destination, and it did everything else. It didn't pull into the driveway though. It apparently just pulls up in front of the street, and so she had to manually pull into the driveway. But that she said, oh, it was pretty impressive. They live in the Palo Alto and the San Francisco Peninsula, so I figure the infrastructure is probably pretty good there. So they're I don't think I'd be an early adopter if I was in Madagascar or someplace like that,
No,
driving a
or up
Tesla.
in the mountains in Colorado.
Right. Maybe not. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
no, yeah, no.
anyway, but I thought that was kind of interesting
It is interesting.
in the sci-fi realm that we live in. And then my wife broke her Apple Watch the other day and had to get a new one. And and we were talking about she not wanting the phone on it, and she said I don't need the phone option. And I said, so you don't want to do Dick Tracy, huh? Or two-way wrist radio?
Ah, I love it. Here we are in our lifetime. Can you
I
believe it?
know. It's kind of wild, isn't it? Yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
All right.
But meanwhile, back at the ranch.
What do you mean? Okay. Okay. So Jesus is telling Helen, and this is not actually in this course, but parts of it are. The reason I direct everything that is unimportant is because it is no way to waste your free will. If you insist on doing the trivial your way, you waste too much time and will on it. Will cannot be freed if it is tied up in trivia. It never gets out. I will tell you exactly what to do in connection with everything that does not matter. That is not an area where choice should be invested. There is better use of time. And
But,
again,
but
why worry? Yeah.
yeah, why worry? And I'm reminded of the Bill Murray mantra, which he used in a couple of films, both Meatballs and The Razor's Edge. And that is, I think he said the exact same quote in both movies. It just doesn't matter. Which generalized refers to everything involving space, time, individuality, and of course the ego's whole thought system of differences, right?
Yes, yeah. And it
It
actually
just
goes
doesn't matter.
just doesn't matter. Came to this the other night when I was meditating. I was like, I just came to the point where I just realized I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this at all anymore
Uh-huh.
at all. I don't have to do this because I can't do it. It's impossible. I'm not doing it. So that's why the minutiae. He says you have to remember to ask me to take care of all the minutiae. I can't even hard pronounce that word.
Minutia.
Minutia. Minutia. Oh, that's how that's spelled. Oh, minutia. And they will be, thank you, Bruce, and they will be taken care of so well and so quickly that you cannot bog down in it. And because it's already been taken care of. Is already done. So we're all we're doing is trying to fiddle with things that are already happened.
We've
So
already put on the life preserver before we land in the vat of chocolate, right?
yeah,
So we can't get
exactly.
bogged down in it, right?
And now I have my bowl of vanilla ice cream and my and I'm ready for a little sundae.
There you
Okay.
go.
The only remaining problem is that you will be unwilling to ask because you are afraid not to be bogged down. Do not
Mm,
let this hold us back. If you will ask, I can arrange these things, even if you are not too enthusiastic. Prayer can be very, did you want to say something?
No, I just think it's hilarious. I mean, that,
Yeah,
well, it's the fear of redemption. We're afraid not to be bogged down.
right. Because
We want villains and anti-heroes in our lives in order to basically make sure there's a ready supply of scapegoats. Because as long as there's, plenty of obvious targets for our projection of unconscious, unfounded guilt, the ego says, "Oh, good, now I can relax." I'm never at peace, but I pretend to be more at ease only because as long as I can take the guilt that I really can't stand in myself and focus it all outside on someone or something else, whether it's a person or a politician or a government or a war or a pollutant or toxic situation in my environment or somewhere in the world, or you know a bodily ill, a financial upset, you know whatever, any relationship with anyone or anything that's not completely peaceful, as long as I can keep my blame thrower going and point it outside, the ego says, "Oh, phew, I
yep,
escaped notice this time."
exactly, exactly. And you're just making me think of the character Zorg in The Fifth Element. I don't know if you remember this. And
Oh, I think I saw that a long time ago.
okay, oh, yeah, okay. So it's Gary Oldman. He's just this greatest villain businessman character. And he's in a conversation with the priest who's coming to try to negotiate something with him or the other, and he's telling the priest, all these things have to be happening because everything has to have a reason and a purpose, and things are only happy if they're following their reason and their purpose, and then he drops I think a glass or something on the floor and it shatters. And as he does that, the little door opens up and like a little Roomba kind of thing comes out, some little robot things, and they come and they clean up the glass and they put everything away and, fix it. And he's looking at, look how happy they are, busy, 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 doing their little thing. That's their purpose. They're fulfilling their purpose. Look how happy they are, as they're cleaning up the mess.
Mhm.
Which is, I mean, his point. And then he takes a drink of something, or he's eating a cherry and he starts choking on the cherry pit. And he's choking and choking and choking and trying to pat himself on the back. And the priest is just standing there watching him, watching him, watching him as he's like going out. And finally, the priest goes over and does the Heimlich on him and he spits out the cherry pit. And the little creature comes running out to clean that up. And,
I've forgotten all about that.
and the priest is like, "Well, where were your little people then when you were dying? There is a purpose for for things, and you're not as big as you think you are." But I mean, the whole story being that the ego is likes being bogged down in
Mhm.
all the minutia because it gives it a sense of purpose being busy, busy, busy. And so Jesus is telling you, don't get involved in that. He's telling Helen, don't get involved in that. It's going to happen anyway. The man's going to choke on the cherry pit. The glass is going to fall on the ground. These things are going to happen. Don't be it's already done. So you don't have to worry about it. Just let it go and let me take care of things. So I'm going to continue reading.
Don't sweat the small stuff, and
Don't
it's all
sweat this.
small stuff.
It's all small stuff. Yeah, you should go and find that scene. I'm sure it's probably on YouTube or something. And it is really just so illustrative. You should do that, I say to you. Uh-huh. So, okay. So Jesus continues. Prayer can be very specific in little matters. If you need a coat, ask me where to find one. I know your taste well, and I also know where the coat is that you would eventually buy anyway, because it's in the script. If you do not like the coat afterwards, that is what would have happened anyway. And I did not pick the coat out for you. You said you wanted something warm, inexpensive, and capable of taking rough wear. I told you you could get a Borgana, but I let you get a better one because the furrier needed you. So he's saying, you may have thought that this was a better thing, but the guy who was selling it to you needed that. And so obviously it was a fur coat. And uh, so what he's telling her is that it's already done. You can busy yourself up with all the little minutia, but it's just wasting your energy doing that. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy, and you shouldn't be using up your free will in those kind of less than um, necessary, in fact, totally unnecessary endeavors. So he says, Ken says then, this reference is to a coat that Helen had recently bought on Jesus's recommendation at Klein's department store. Helen was accustomed to shopping at some of the city's finer stores, such as Lord and Taylor or B. Altman. Klein's, which was a 5-minute walk from Helen's apartment, was known as a real bargain store and hardly one in which a woman with Helen's taste would have bought a winter coat. Yet Jesus had instructed Helen to go there. Not only did Helen find exactly the coat she wanted, but the salesman who waited on her needed Helen's help very badly. Okay, here we go. He had a retarded child and was at a loss for what to do. Helen was able to be extremely helpful to him. The point Jesus was trying to make to Helen here was that by consulting his hire shopping service, which is something it says see below, she would not only receive what she believed she needed, but that she would be able to help others through her as he would be able to help others through her as well. It was ultimately then a lesson in how the miracle saves time. His explanation continues. Note, however, this is Jesus, that it is better in terms of the criteria you established. I could do this because you saw the quote more that way than in terms of a particular material. You thought of Klein's yourself a few days ago, and then you decided against it because Bargana is price fixed. Then you remembered a coat Grace, Louis's sister, once got there that was much cheaper and seemed pretty much the same, and ask yourself whether it was really right to be sold on a particular trade name through advertising. Oh, that opened your mind. Oh my gosh, I cannot save you more time than you will let me. But if you are willing to try the higher shopping service, which also covers all lower order necessities and even quite a number of whims within reason, I have very good use for the time we could save. Remember, the specific answer you get depends on the specific question you ask. The fewer limits you impose, the better the answer you'll get. Example, you could ask, where do I find a Borgana coat? Or, where is the coat I want? Or, where is the coat I should get? And so on. The form of the thought determines the level of creation. Wow. The form of the thought determines the level of creation. So, but eventually she's still going to buy the same coat at the same place. So any of those questions she's asked, it doesn't matter, right? Uh, because that's where she would have gone anyway.
You know what that kind of reminds me of is, um, I think I may have mentioned this before. Over a decade ago, I had an opportunity with a colleague and friend who was a process improvement consultant. And he said, "Hey, Bruce, if you read the stack of books on value stream mapping and process improvement, I could probably get you a job consulting for the Air Force." And I thought, well, I've been in technical fields, and so I read this 4 or 5 books over a course of 2 or 3 weeks, and then after a couple of phone interviews, was offered a job as a Air Force freelance consultant for this company called Mainstream, which I thought was kind of funny because I don't think of myself as a mainstream person at all. But they're really nice bunch of folks, and they actually shared some pretty cool ideas. One of which is the 4 stages of competency. But anyway, the where I was going with it was the maybe I just derailed my thought. Oh, I know it was the um, what were we just talking about? Oh, I know what it was. It was the Toyota 5 whys. that because
Yes.
Toyota's manufacturing process over the years was refined by, they would ask what they call the five whys. And when they look at a process that was inefficient, they would say, well, why do we do, why do we, how can we make this process better? And it might be manufacturing a widget or some kind of gizmo that goes into a part of a car, right? Well, so they always try to back it up like, well, why does this part have to be designed this way? Could it be designed a better way? And maybe they're having trouble making the part a certain way. So they would ask, well, does it have to be made this way? Could it be made a different way? And then that would kind of back into, kind of keep, higher and higher elevation views of the problem, and more systemic and all encompassing, you know, looking at things from a holistic perspective rather than an isolated one. And pretty soon they'd get to well, maybe we could come up with a completely different solution for what this vehicle is trying to achieve. And and they might invent a whole new mode of transportation, if they kept going with it. But they called it the five whys because five was usually plenty to get back to asking really fundamental important questions about process. But then the course obviously would take that even further. It's like, why do I need an ego thought system in the first place? Well, because I think I pulled off this impossible crime, right? Which
Exactly,
didn't happen.
exactly. And that whole thing, I don't know if I ever told you that part of my graduate studies was in quality engineering. And so I really got into the Toyota system, the
Cool.
all those different things, root cause analysis. And
Mhm.
actually, when I first started working with Regina Dawn Akers, she had studied some of that as well. And we were able to come up with a way of using the five whys or the root cause analysis
Mhm.
um, in contemplation
Oh, cool.
and
Very
looking at,
cool.
what, where do these thoughts come from?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Well,
yeah,
that's neat.
really.
I had no idea that you and Regina had probably been delving into some of the similar material. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because she was a trainer for the Air Force. For,
Oh, okay. Well, then that
yeah,
makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So it's just so funny how all these things come together, for the purpose. And so this is Jesus just telling us, we don't need to go into these deep analysis of anything. If the script is written, what's going to happen is going to happen. And, all you have to do, even just asking for help, is a way of letting go of the ego's belief that it's autonomous and it can help itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's really the principle. That's really what's happening. It's not because we're asking, help me make a decision, because the decision was made a long time ago. So the only help I need is accepting the decision and letting it be. That when you think about it, and no matter how tightly controlled your life is and your world is, and how you think things should be, how you make things or arrange things, whatever, you can't control everything in the whole universe. You can only control, you think you control a very, very small, minute part of it. Just like
The
for
minutia.
the minutia, exactly. For Helen to be able to buy that coat, it took, thousands of years for, people to come up with the technology for, building the buildings and setting up the supply chains and making the coats and doing, the sewing machines and the weavers and all the different things that go into making that coat. Her decision to just pluck it off the rack is the kind of the ultimate of everything that the universe has gone into to put it there for her.
Mm-hmm.
But it was there for her from the beginning. So there was no process really. This process that we have in our mind is all imaginary. And so this is what you have to come to understand eventually is that the process of your life is imaginary. The
Right.
process of, what I do, when I do it, how I get there, this is why he's asking us to ask him. I'm only here to be truly helpful.
Yep.
I'm not here to, figure out how everything works. I'm just here to be an instrument. And so it just you know, Jesus given Helen these simple lessons that I'm kind of sad that I mean, I know part of this is in the course, but I really like reading how it's written this way because it's just Jesus just, logically cutting down all your arguments for why you should resist
Yeah.
and why you should try to control because you can't control.
Right.
Basically that's it.
Yeah, and I think the course helps show us how we're all micromanaging a dream, and we're totally wrapped up in minutia. And I don't think he suggests that we stop dealing with all the little specifics of our everyday lives, but that if we can remember that we're dreaming while we're doing that, and that gives us is the total shift in perspective that helps us see the innocence instead of the unconscious projection of the guilt on everyone and everything. And I'm miserable, but it's not my fault is the ego's unspoken mantra. Sometimes it's actually spoken, but but a lot of times it's just unconsciously working in the background like malware that's undetected. And we just need to keep looking at how we want to make ourselves the victim of the world, and look at the minutia with Holy Spirit's help as a classroom exercise. Each little trivial thing becomes a classroom exercise in seeing how am I investing my peace in the outcome of what happens or doesn't happen in the world, specifically and most particularly with the body that I think I've identified with and the persona that seems to be the cause of it, but it's really being caused by the decision making choice I'm making all the time for a crazy thought system of separation.
Huh, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I mean, this is all Jesus is asking us to do. Even
Mhm.
these lessons, again, like we're doing right now, my mind holds only what I think with God. So, all these other things that I think are here are, you know, it is the minutia.
Yeah. It doesn't ask us to stop doing them. It just asks us to look at them from a place devoid of condemnation in our mind, and see that the ego wants to you know uh, bicker and canoodle and be upset about every little detail, maybe not on a conscious level all the time, but if there's any kind of lack of ease, you can pretty well bet that's the insane thought system, um, rearing its ugly head in our mind and saying, I'm upset because of fill in the blanks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once we start realizing that it's all make believe, it's only make believe, then we're cool. We can relax. I was gonna mention here, I already put the bookmark because we don't really have a lot of time left.
Yeah,
But I
I
was
need to
gonna
leave a couple minutes
mention
early too.
if you had some spare brain cells that wanted to look at things check out the work of Edwards Deming, Deming. And he's the man who brought the quality. He's a statistician, American statistician, who went to Japan after the war and started the quality improvement movement there. And
That name sounds
the
familiar.
the way that he did that, the reason that he did that was because, Japan was devastated after the war, and their economy was in a shambles. And the things that you could buy from Japan were, Japanese cheap Japanese toys, cheap Japanese this and that. Everybody looked at Japan as being just low quality, cheap stuff.
And they turned
And
it completely
so
around.
And so Deming went there and worked with them on improving the quality control in their manufacturing to the point where it actually became like premier in quality. Now, when you think about, Japanese engineering, you see a very high level of quality in your mind. You see it that way because he changed the people. He changed the whole aspect of it. But the thing that was so beautiful about Deming, he had something he called the 14 points. And the points that were let me see if I can find them because the points are things like um, uh, every employee is equally valuable and every employee should be seen as being a crucial part of the process. So you should encourage every employee, give them education, let them, if they wanted to go and study flower arranging, support them in that because the better that they are as individual people, the higher the quality of the work that they will put out. And if the corporation is supportive of their people and giving them equality and giving all the different things, I mean, it's amazing. You look up, Deming's 14 points. And, that was my basic philosophy. I was so into that when I was in, working for corporations and working for the government that, it became like a total philosophy of being and actually was the way that I was able, when I started studying A Course in Miracles, to hit boom, oh, I see what Jesus is doing here. He is using Deming's points to help me see my brother in a different way and to help me see myself and my place in the world in a different way. Pretty amazing stuff. So I don't want to, get on a, Deming being the great modern philosopher, but I swear to you, he did so much to change the way that we see things in this world.
Well, I will check that out. Thanks, Liv.
Yeah.
I got to run and set up
Okay.
another
All
class.
right.
So anyway, have a
Okay.
great week and love to all, and see you next week. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Brother Bruce. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the YouTube stream. And join us again next week for Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of a